Okay, welcome to Chapter 1 in the first book, The Practice of System and Network Administration. I really like this book. Okay, so let's kind of start to begin. So on page 3, they start talking about climbing out of the hole. Yes, these guys have clearly been system administrators, okay? And they understand the workload and how difficult this job is, and without the right kind of tools and mindset, you're going to drown. So yeah. So they basically point out two major things that are causing problems. To be a successful system administrator, you need to figure out your work in progress. In other words, the stuff that you're working on now, you need a system. You just can't do it, off the cuff. And the second is time sinkholes, those things that just consume your time so that you don't have enough time to do the real things because you're running around putting out fires. Okay, so they talk about the ways to do better. You need to track and control your work in progress. You need some sort of a tracking system. It doesn't even have to be an expensive system. It could be something as simple as something you put on a board or something. You need to automate your operating system installs. When you get a new batch of PCs, that ought not be something that puts you into a tailspin for a couple of days. You need to have this all figured out and automated, so that when new machines or replacement machines come in, you can just push a few buttons and walk away and go do other things. And then this whole concept of continuous integration and continuous delivery, and we'll talk about that in great deal. So at the very beginning of the book, there's some really cool stories. I like the one about the guy stuck in the hole. Okay, you ought to read that little section, a little shaded section in the book. And basically what it's talking about is, a guy falls in the hole and he's asking for help. Then a friend comes by and says, "Hey man, I'm stuck in the hole." And the guy jumps down in the hole with him. He goes, "What'd you do that for? I mean, now there's two of us stuck in the hole." The guy says, "Yeah, but I've been in this hole before and I know the way out." That is the concept of this book. These authors have been there, done that, and are trying to give you some good advice. So hopefully you're receptive to their advice. Okay, on page 5, they're talking about, organizing work in progress. So there's all sorts of help desk software out there that can kind of, help a little bit. But, that's not really, that's the technical part, and that's not really what we're talking about. So how about, like, one thing that could drive people crazy is, password resets, right? So why not have a self-service system so that you don't ever submit a ticket? They just do it themselves. Give a portal on the web page someplace where they go in and say, "Oh man, I need to reset my password," and so they do it in presto chango. It doesn't involve you, the system administrator, at all. That's great. That's brilliant. And then of course, you need some sort of a ticketing system. And there's you can buy systems, and there's awful lot of open source ones that are out there that are pretty decent. Or you could do something called a Kanban board, and this costs practically nothing, like a magnetic board or a cork board or something. So what's the point of having a ticketing system? Well, first of all, customers are going to get angry when if they expect you to be able to do something in 2 days' time and it takes you 4 days. They're going to be pissed. And so a ticketing system allows the customer to say, "Oh, I had no idea that the CEO was having a problem with their computer. Obviously, mine's going to come after that." That kind of stuff. Because it's the visibility. It's the visibility for your immediate supervisor, if you're the system administrator, and for the customers to say, "Look, I'm kind of busy here. It's going to take a couple of days for me to get to you." Okay? And they have to understand that. But if you don't have a system, it's going to be, I just put a ticket into the black hole and nothing ever happens. And so you have no way to defend yourself against angry customers. And obviously you need a priority system because not everything is equally important. And again, a priority 1, 2, or 3, or whatever you want to call it. And, you could even have color codes and things like that. And so people could look at it, the boss wandering by your cube could look at your scheduling system and go, "Oh, I see you're working on 2 high priority systems. Okay, good luck. I'll leave you alone. I won't pester you today." That kind of stuff. And then, of course, those things where time or money is involved. Some things are very easy to do, really, really quick to do, right? Like, this is only going to take 15 seconds to fix. So how long is it going to lay in the queue before you get around to doing that? And then those things that cost you money, Okay, they ought to be a slightly different priority. Kind of makes sense. And then there's a whole concept of a tier 1 and a tier 2. Obviously, if you're alone in your organization, you're the only system administrator, well, you're not going to have any tiers. But otherwise, the lower graded employees ought to, be the tier 1 folks who get, password problems, or I forgot my password, or whatever. Simple kind of things. And the tier 2 ones are working on the more complicated things. And that provides that level of differentiation between those things that are kind of sort of simple, that can be done in a hurry, and those things that are darn well are going to take a long time to figure out. And so that provides you the time you need to work on the complicated things, because you now have 2 tiers of work. Now, if you're a solo system administrator and there's only one of you, well, then a lot of this stuff is just kind of So what they recommend is you break up your time. Like, I don't know, maybe in the morning you do this type of work, and in the afternoon you set aside time to work on the tough projects. Something like that. So, split your time so that you absolutely positively will be working on both the meaningless quick things and the more complicated important things, because otherwise the meaningless little things are just going to erode all of your time, and you won't have any time at all to work on the real problems. And you have some things, what they call ultra quick solutions where, okay, you have one guy has a problem with something, and you go, oh, I know exactly what that is. Don't postpone that for days. Go ahead and get it done. It's kind of a go for the win. If you can make one customer happy, it's going to take 2 minutes to do, then by God, do it. Okay. So basically what I said was follow a priority schedule, and then I just told you don't follow a priority schedule. Do the quick ones first. Again, it kind of sort of depends on on your customer relationship. If you need to win some quick, do some quick wins, that'd be the way to do it. On page 8, they talk about those things that they think are emergencies, sample emergencies. You got a server that's down. Oh, okay, that's an emergency. You got a problem that at least 10 people are having. Okay, that's a real emergency. A problem where you're losing money. Something's gone wrong, and you're let's say you're an e-commerce site and people can't buy stuff. Well, yeah, that's obviously an emergency. And then a data leak. Yeah, that's an emergency. So yes, those things are going to stop the presses. Everyone gather together. We're going to work on this together until we get it done, kind of a thing. Okay, I mentioned the Kanban on page 8. The goal of Kanban really is just simplicity and transparency. So there's a kind of an interesting graphic here. So this is a 3-column Kanban thing where here's the things you're not working on. Those are things that you are working on, and then the completed. This is important. If people can't see how many things you completed in a week, they're going to say, if they walk up to this board and all it showed was the backlog of work and the things you're working on, it didn't show that 3rd column, they're going, geez, you don't ever get anything done. No, you need to show in a week's time the things that got completed. That way your boss could wander by, look at this board and go, oh, man, and particularly if you were color coded, man, you got 3 red ones done and a couple of yellow ones and 6 green ones. Wow. Okay. And again, this is like nothing. You could use sticky notes on a board. Like 0 cost, and it provides that visibility so people who wander by, particularly your boss, but sometimes the customers, can tell basically that you're doing okay. So this is an example of an ultra simple one. Here's another one where you can have different swim lanes, as they call them. I'm working on, the Linux team is working on this, and the Windows team is working on that, and blah 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 blah. Okay, those are actually pretty good. So one more time, the customer can see this, so don't hide it someplace. Don't put it like in the server room where nobody codes. Put it out someplace where somebody can look at it. My vet's office has something kind of similar to this. When I go to my vet, I have a board showing all the doctors at the vet and are they on time, all this kind of status, where they're here, they're on time, and this is 20 minutes behind, and so I look over at the board and I go, oh, okay, it manages my expectation. It's a very simple, they did it on a whiteboard, very simple, Dr. Smith and Dr. Jones, are here, and this one's running 10 minutes behind, this one's running 20 minutes behind. I look at my watch and go, okay, I know how long I'm going to be sitting here. Excellent way to manage customers' expectations. Okay, so there's an important concept coming up talking about push versus pull. Okay, so if your goal is, let's say your boss's goal is you must complete, some arbitrary number, 50 tickets a day, okay, whatever. Okay, if that's their goal and that's what they're tracking, and that's how you get evaluated for your performance, well then you're going to do 50 tickets a day. Are you going to do a good job? Probably not. But you're going to do what they're measuring. They're measuring how many tickets you did. So by God, you're going to do practically anything in the world to get it from active over to completed, even if it really wasn't fixed. But I've seen people, what's called split ticket, where you say, okay, submit another ticket. I got you halfway finished, but you submit another ticket for the other half. So that makes your statistics look really good, but the customer is not actually very happy, are they? So the thing is, things do not go faster just because you want them to. I mean, that's kind of a simple concept, right? If your boss say, I want you to be able to do 50 of these, and you're only able to do 30, no amount of cracking the whip is actually going to help much. I need more resources to be able to do this. And so quality is reduced whenever you have a system like that. So there's a very good example on page 12 talking about a meat grinder. I know it's a strange analogy, but read that little section. It's actually pretty cool. Basically what they're saying is, if you're trying to grind so much meat, you could run the machine a little bit faster, but if you do, it'll heat up and kind of bruise things, and so the quality kind of sucks. And so, a pull scenario is one of those things where I'm gonna say I want quality ground beef coming out of this thing, and we're gonna work from that way back to figure out, do I need more people trained on the machine? Do I need multiple machines? Those kinds of things. Okay, again, this is not rocket surgery or brain science. This is just common sense things, but you'd be surprised. You get stuck in a system administrator's job, and somehow common sense just goes out the window. I don't really understand it. People, well, you need to do this many tickets. It's like, don't you really want our customers to be happy? Well, yeah, of course. Like, well then, okay, then why do we have a quota? Okay. So the idea is pull, don't push. A pull system basically says, I know what we need to do and I'm doing that. So basically leave me alone. Okay, time sinkholes on page 12. These are the things where you're too busy to be able to work on and there's an excellent little quote in here. It's kind of buried there on page 12. You're too busy mopping the floor to fix the leak. I really, really like that analogy. That's a perfect statement. Too busy mopping the floor to fix the leak. In other words, something has gone wrong, and yet you're scurrying around working on the symptoms, and not at all working on a cure. Okay. So an example would be like operating system deployment, like you got a bunch of machines come in, and so now you're spending all your time, fixing up new machines, or patch management. You're running around like a maniac, making sure all the machines are patched, or virus updates and all the rest of those things. So you're too busy doing the mundane stuff that no one ever says. If you're so busy doing those things I just mentioned, and then someone says, the database server seems to be kind of getting slow. Could you look into that and see if you can give me some recommendations on how to fix that? That never happens. You're too busy. Okay. So let's just talk about that with example of the operating system install. You could have it pre-installed by the vendor. Like you're buying 10 PCs from Dell, and you just tell them, hey, just give me, Windows 10 image, and I'll just do it. And that you might think, I'm going to save time by having the vendor pre-install the operating system for me, and all's going to be well. Yeah, the problem is now, over a period of time, now there's no telling what version of Windows is on each PC, because it might be slightly different. Every time you order, you might get a different version with slightly different configuration, and you have no idea. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, so you guys know how this works.